I think that I may now know what the main criticism of this project is going to be. Um, I've spoken before about the need to try and forecast the issues with your story ahead of time, to sort of look ahead and see what critics might say about your work, what audiences might think of your work before you even start, before you even complete it, and as you're going through it. The reason why is that it allows you to kind of alleviate a lot of the issues, a lot of the mistakes. Um, some of these things obviously are going to be completely subjective. It will be not so much that your work doesn't kind of live up to the hype that you gave it. It could just be, the content of the work is not what people find good. They might find objectionable, what have you. It may not be, that the prose was lacking, that your use of metaphor and simile were off, that your sentences were clunky or hard to understand, whatever. It might be just subjective things. Um, and I think I might have discovered what the subjective thing is going to be. Um, it's difficult because I haven't revealed what the topic yet is. I have not revealed what this collection of stories is about yet. I'd say maybe the next month or so, I'll make the kind of I'll kind of go over it. But the content that I'm discussing in the story is going to be controversial. The story is going to be very, very controversial. Um, this collection of short stories is going to be about an incident, and again, the interconnected lives of those that experience this incident. And when I first began it, I didn't think this was ever going to be any sort of controversy. I figured what I was going to start with, the subject I was going to tackle, was not going to be of any real outrage or anything like that. But I ran the idea by my critique group the other evening. Um, the reason for this is simply I had actually submitted that first the first story basically that I was working on. I submitted kind of the first draft to the group just to get an idea, just take a look at it, just to see, hey, what do you think of the story? Like initial feedback on this particular story here. And I later explained to him that this was the first in a collection that deals with the same subject, um, or the same topic of the story itself, is going to be basically part of the giant collection. And there were questions. There were questions about, you know, do authors? It's the age-old question. I mean, I won't say age-old, but it's come late now, which is, how do you talk about a topic without exploiting it? How do you discuss a topic while maybe raising, if it's something of great controversy, how do you bring light to it without using it simply as cover, without simply using it as a vehicle for your story, which was my critique. My critique was not so much on the subject matter that it couldn't be discussed, but that there was a fear that me going into this project, I would be using the subject matter as a plot device. The story would be serving some sort of basic plot device, um, in that the content would not shine a light on the issue that surrounds a story. That in essence, I am sort of just borrowing. I think they said borrowing grief. I think was the term that was used. Um, in going over the story, and it's an interesting point that I hadn't considered. To be frank, I figured the subject matter might raise some eyebrows, but I didn't think going into that was going to be an issue, because I'm coming from what I consider to be a position of respect towards the subject. At least, at least my opinion of it is that there is more to this than simply using this item as a plot device. Um, what I'll say on the issue is I don't. It will be obviously discussed more when the work's finally read, but it's something that's hit me now. Is this initial thing of, when this comes out 2-3 years from now, whenever I have, these stories finally as a whole completed, um, will they be critiqued in that way? Will they be viewed in that way? in a very sort of negative light? Will I be viewed as someone that borrowed, I guess, the grief, or borrowed the subject matter to serve the story's purpose, rather than the story serving the subject matter instead? It's an interesting point. Um, Something I've been keeping in my mind now. Um, what makes it more complicated too is that these stories are obviously going to be released individually, right? My hope basically is that I get these into some sort of magazines beforehand, and then eventually I have a whole collection that I can either query or self-publish, what have you, basically afterwards, once all the stories get published. Um, that's the hope, that's the thought behind it. So it makes it even more interesting, because you're going to only be reading one story out of an entire collection with this same idea and unifying, I guess, catalyst, serving as like the central thing for these stories. And if I say something in one story, I think it's great for the collection, because I'll voice an opinion on the subject, and I'll kind of pay respect. But does every single short story have to do that? Does every story need to sort of belabor the same point that one can do? Um, is there room for a more superficial view of the subject matter in some stories, not other ones? Um, how about the role of the individual versus the community and the effect it has? There's a lot of things, when things are taken by itself, that um, plays into this sort of, I guess, lack of a better word, sort of mental masturbation that you get into, where you kind of wonder, okay, these different things are going to play a factor. How are you going to address it? Um, and so right now, I suppose I'm in this very confused sort of state when dealing with that. I've, for the most part, been able to table it. It's something cute in the back of my mind, but it's not something that stopped me from writing. It hasn't paralyzed me. The reason for it is, I suppose, twofold. One is, for the moment, I have the respect of the subject. I've paid enough respect to the subject and to what the story is about, that I'm not worried about it. That I don't necessarily fear um, having my opinion of this subject matter, or having my approach to it misrepresented. It may be, and it may be correctly represented as well, and people may not agree with it. So it's part of it. Is that I trust enough in myself initially. The other reason too is, to be frank, I don't think I'm big enough yet to garner any controversy. Right? Um, Lord, I'd love to be wrong, right? I'd love to have way more people reading my work and leveling critique, because that means at least I'm out. At least I'm a known name, right? I've I've progressed my writing career to the point where people actually know who I am, which is awesome. But for now, I'm not. For now, I think I'm kind of for lack of a better term, a nobody. Not that I view myself or my work as anything less than other writers that are published that are more prominent, but just the reality of I have a small YouTube channel here, I have a very small presence, so I don't think this controversy is going to be that. If there is one, it might be maybe a handful of individuals might view this way, and that's you can't please everybody. Um, so it feels like more of a champagne problem to deal with later on, if I'm ever so lucky to deal with it. Um, it's it's interesting. It's on my mind. It's interesting, and I'm sure I'll be talking about this more and more. And I will go into this more and more as I work on it. As in the next month or so, when I start revealing what the subject's about, I'll go more into this. But for now, that's what's on my mind. And again, sorry for being so vague. It's not the time yet to reveal it, but that'll be coming soon enough. Uh, it's not a consideration that most people think of. I don't think when they start a project, at least I don't think of it that. I don't think so. But something to consider. Something to consider is the subject itself, what you're discussing, the relation, and all that stuff. To the work, how your work honors or takes from it. Does it respect it? Does it borrow from it? Is it borrowing from that subject just to satisfy its own means? Are your intentions more superficial or deep? Um, Lots of things that play into this, and this is a very, very deep sort of conversation. Something that might work well, maybe for like a round table. Maybe me and Ian will discuss this on our authors bantering video at some point. For now, I'm going to sign off here, and I will see you, though, tomorrow.